Let's pick things up there for tonight's Political Insider. Joining me, Molly O'Toole, politics reporter for Defense One. Okay, Molly, it's official. Joe Biden is not running, but several of his closest confidants said up until last night he was planning to get in the race. What's your reaction to the news? Were you surprised?
I was, to the extent, other members of the media are not immune from the media hype, and really things had been to such a fever pitch over the last couple days. A lot of people reporting from people very close to Biden, sources close to Biden, that he would be running. So I was surprised to some extent, but when you think about that his calculation hasn't really changed, that it was going to be very difficult for him to challenge Hillary Clinton for the nomination, sort of by sheer numbers alone. It was going to be difficult for him to win the nomination, and that calculation hasn't really changed.
Yep, you're right. Yesterday, Biden made a point saying Republicans were not his enemy. This is a stark contrast to Hillary Clinton's comments during the Democratic debate. And today, Biden said while he won't be a candidate, he will not be silent. What role do you think he'll play during the campaign, Molly?
That comment in particular, that while he will not be a candidate, he will not be silent, and his really adamant defense of the Obama administration, President Obama's legacy, I thought was not so subtly directed toward Hillary Clinton, who's really in the campaign. When we look at through the national security and foreign policy lens, she's really been calling more and more loudly for a more aggressive foreign policy, and has been more direct in her criticism of the Obama administration when it comes to some of these global security crises that we're seeing. So Biden's comments, I believe, were directed at Clinton, in that he was suggesting that that the Democratic candidate should really run on Obama's record rather than run from it. So I think his role in the election, he won't be soft-spoken when it comes to holding Democratic candidates accountable to the sort of ideals he believes that he and Obama represent.
Does Biden's decision pretty much clinch the nomination for Hillary? And do you think Biden thinks that she's the right person to lead the party?
Well, as I said, it was going to be difficult for sort of statistically for Biden to, in fact, challenge Hillary Clinton for the nomination. But this really does break the path to the nomination wide open for Hillary Clinton. This was the major point of concern for the Clinton campaign. Obviously, Vice President Joe Biden has some of the widest name recognition of any Democratic politician, not only in the U.S., but really in the world. And in many ways, he aligns more closely with the Democratic base than she does, particularly when it comes to issues of foreign policy and national security, when Vice President Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton were both in the room, so to speak, or literally in the room, when she was Secretary of State. It was often Hillary Clinton that was pushing Obama towards more of a hawkish leaning, towards more ready use of force, and Joe Biden was often the voice in the room that was suggesting he be a little more hesitant, that he hold back, that he be a little more sure before going that route. So in that way, I think the Clinton campaign is very relieved today that Joe Biden will not be entering the race, and that they can continue to sort of march towards the nomination. She's the still presumptive front runner despite the challenge from Bernie Sanders, and I think she'll continue to be so.
She's got to be careful. She still has enemies within the Obama administration who've been doing some sniping lately. They've got to get their act together, unlike the Republicans who continue to fight. So it's not a done deal yet for Clinton. Well, if she gets the nomination, she's just got to make sure everybody's on board with her, because this week we've heard some members of the administration quietly say, no, that's not quite the way it happened when she was Secretary of State. It'll be interesting to bet. All right, let's switch gears, Molly, to the ongoing crisis in Syria. Last month, the Obama administration agreed to take in 10,000 Syrian refugees from the war-torn region, but there's been some pushback from the FBI and other intelligence agencies. Explain that.
So the pushback has mainly been in some of these hearings that we're starting to see on Capitol Hill, as Congress looks at not only granting the Obama administration the funds to raise those caps on refugees. So annually, on average, the U.S. has been taking in 70,000 refugees. Now, that's for the entire globe. There was the announcement that President Obama wanted to raise that cap to 100,000. So as they're looking at granting this funding, they've been holding hearings. Republicans in particular have really latched on to the national security concerns that even the Obama administration has cited when looking at ways to let in more Syrian refugees. Now, the members of various chiefs of the intelligence community, some other agencies, such as the FBI director, have suggested that their concern is based mainly in what they call intelligence gaps. As we all well know, the U.S. Doesn't really have eyes on the ground in Syria, so they're concerned that there are gaps in the complete picture that they might have on the security situation in Syria. But it's really important to note, and we did a recent investigation on this, and in looking into that national security concern that's cited, almost every agency that we spoke to representing the intelligence community said that there is really no quantifiable data that's sort of the basis of this national security concern. It's an overabundance of caution given the threats that the Islamic State has made, calling on sort of lone wolves to exploit this system, which is virtually impossible to exploit.
Yep. Now, on the flip side of the argument, though, more than 80 lawmakers want to speed up the process of accepting immigrants into the U.S. What's their argument?
So their argument essentially is that we're looking at 4 million displaced Syrians outside of the country, 8 million displaced Syrians inside the country, and since the civil war began in 2011, the United States has let in less than 2,000, and we've received applications from over 20,000 Syrian applicants. And they say that we can really do better, and that we should do better, that there's a moral imperative here. And they suggest that the very extensive security clearance process for these refugees, which is one of the strictest in the world, is way too long, that it's inefficient. It's on average, it's 18 to 24 months for a refugee once they're referred to potentially enter the United States. And in the meantime, obviously, they're in a very desperate and dangerous situation. They're suggesting that we look at ways that we can make this more efficient. One example, just quickly, cases of Syrian refugee families, they all have to be cleared at the same time, and those are temporary security clearances. One can expire, making the entire group start over through that very extensive process all over again. So that's one of the ways that they're saying that we can look at this process, make it better, not lower security standards, but make it more efficient.
It's going to be a major problem in the months to come. Molly O'Toole, politics reporter for Defense One. Good to have you with us, Molly. Thanks.
Thanks.